Just a few words before we get into the main video. When I do these comparison videos, I let the individual versions play their sound and music for 1 minute at a time or whatever time I feel is right. When you see the system's name light up, that means that version is the music and sound that's being played. Just for reference.
Thalamus.
Hello and welcome to Let's Compare Features for the Commodore 64 and Amiga. Haven't done one of these videos for a while, but I want to cover this game, and why not make it a Let's Compare video. For reference, I should say that the Commodore 64 version was the original version, and the Amiga version was released about 3 years after the original. The backstory for Creatures is a bit wonky. This race of whatever has found that their planet has become uninhabitable, so they are looking for another place to settle. And they find a place to settle, but on the way to the new inhabitable planet, they get hit by an asteroid, meteor or something like that, and crash land onto Earth. Very specifically on an island in the Pacific, but they find that that area is probably funky enough for them, so they are quite happy with their find. What they don't know is that the island is already inhabited by demons who are not too crazy about having these individuals showing up on their doorstep. At some point, the race decides to rename themselves to Fuzzy Wuzzies or Wonky Donkeys or whatever. It's irrelevant. What is relevant is that because they want to celebrate their luck, they have this big party, and Clyde, the main character of the game, passes out with drunk in the bush, blah blah, you know, green stuff. And when he wakes up the following morning, he has a massive headache and a fiery breath. Of course, he realizes that his fence has been nick-capped, and brave or foolish as he is, he decides to go out and rescue them. Yeah, the story about Clyde having passed out drunk in the bush, I can't help but feel that whoever came up with the plot is talking from a personal experience, but that is a thing aside. Whatever the official classification of this game is, I would consider Creatures to be a platform action adventure, in which of course you are in control of a Clyde who can shoot fireballs, and because of his previous night's partying, use his fire breath, which is quite powerful. It seems to damage enemies on a frame basis, which is far stronger, but of course the downside is that it has to be charged up. You do that by holding down the fire button. Initially you only have normal angled shots, but once you get to a shop at the end of each substage, you will be able to buy new shot angles and new shot types by trading in the small individual features you pick up. Those are called ingredients. Creatures was a super hyped game back in the day, and it received an awful lot of coverage from different computer magazines. I remember reading several articles about the development of this game. As a platformer, specifically the Commodore 64 version, I would say if precision and jumping and pixel perfect movement bothers you, this game is definitely not for you. The game is very unforgiving in its required precision sometimes. Jumps can be annoying to try and complete, and much later on, you will be moving through areas where one pixel off is enough to get you killed, and because of the Commodore 64 version is using a checkpoint system, dying 2 pixels before defined checkpoint can be extremely daunting. From a graphical point of view, I actually think I quite like the Commodore 64's graphics. I know some people have been complaining about it being a bit coarse and all that good stuff, but there will always be people complaining about something. You just can't get it right. I think the graphical style is very fitting for the game. There's definitely certain elements I would have loved to look differently, but by and large I think it suits the game. The sound is perfectly fine. The music, while it's good, I do find the in-game music, because of course you have the option when you are at a level indicator screen to play with music or just with sound effects. On certain levels I do find the music to be rather interesting, at least at certain points. The Amiga version's graphics is very different from the Commodore 64 version, and to be honest, I think that's a good thing. Instead of just copy pasting and make a clone of the Commodore 64 version, the team that made the Amiga version has gone their own way. The game is virtually the same on both systems. The graphical difference is quite distinct, and I'm quite happy with it. The Amiga sound and music is fine again, but I have a massive pain point with the Amiga version. First and foremost, the shot sound it sounds like a champagne bottle popping its cork, and it supersedes every other sound in the game, and it pains me to no end. I think it is quite a shortcoming of the Amiga version, but it is a shortcoming I'm prepared to forgive it. When it comes to the gameplay, the team that made the Amiga version have had time to look at the Commodore 64 version and find any pain points and iron them out a bit, which they have done. The checkpoint system of the Commodore 64 version has been removed. You basically come back to where you died if you lose a life, meaning that you can effectively, to a certain point, brute force certain screens. Some would say it's distinctively easier than the Commodore 64 version in that regard, but I would say that yes, by and large, the Amiga version probably plays somewhat easier than the Commodore 64 version, but I will not necessarily say it's easy as such. What I will say is that the team making the Amiga version has taken the worst sting out of the Commodore 64 version in order to make the game somewhat more enjoyable and playable. I'm not saying the Commodore 64 version isn't playable, it is, but because of the checkpoint mechanic and making one mistake can send you screens, quite a few screens back. Once you start getting to the later levels, the prospect of having to go through all the areas you previously had to go through because there are no checkpoints, there's no password system or anything, so you have to play the game from level 1 when you game over, makes it extremely daunting. It did for me. Some people might love it, some people will probably cherish the challenge, but for me I found it to be frustrating, especially when you get to the much later levels where the difficulty goes through the roof. You have screen after screen after screen of precision movement, precision jumping, and making one mistake, losing a life, and going 7 screens back feels extremely punishing. That aside, I think as a whole that Creatures is overhyped. I think certain people felt it was better than it necessarily was, but it's definitely not a bad game. If you like a rough challenge that can be very, very punishing on occasion, Creatures is a great experience. If you prefer to have a challenge with a bit more forgiveness, then the Amiga version is the version I would play. By and large, from a graphical and sound perspective, I probably prefer the Commodore 64 version, but from a gameplay perspective, I definitely find the Amiga version much more enjoyable. Each version are perfectly playable, and I would not necessarily say that one is better than the other. I would just say they offer a slightly different experience, which is something that I missed badly from the 16-bit days. The fact that there are different versions. That being said, the Amiga version is an example of the Commodore 64 conversion done right. The Commodore 64 version, because of pacing differences, still has a bit to go, so let us round things out, or off, whatever it's called. I played an awful lot of Commodore 64 games, which has received an Amiga version later on, and the other way around for that matter, but predominantly Commodore 64 versions being converted to Amiga, and seen some absolutely horrible disasters. I just need to mention Last Ninja 2 to, yeah, that just tops them all, I think. The Amiga version and Commodore 64 version play in many ways identical, but the Amiga version is faithful to the original. It's just taking some of the sharp edges off, but it is virtually exactly the same game. And by and large, I would say that if all Amiga versions of Commodore 64 existing games could be done with the same care and quality as the Amiga version of Creatures, I would have been a much happier chappy than I have been in many cases. Despite its minor nickel points, I do think the Amiga version is a very good conversion. I decided to do this heads up, by the way, because some people might find the following scenes tasteless. I find them silly, but whatever. One of the things that this game gained notoriety for was the torture screens. Because of course, just rescuing your buddies isn't good enough. You actually have to drag them out of a bit of butter. And just to showcase, because me, I decided that I would showcase on the Commodore 64 version what happens if you don't get things right. Yeah. I got things to do. Oh, that can't be good. Oops. As I said, some people will probably find it morbid or tasteless. Anyway, we will complete the puzzle on the Amiga version. And the interesting part is, even if you know what you're supposed to be doing, which is of course the first problem, I screw up slightly, but even if you do it near perfectly, you just do not have an awful lot of time spare to get these rooms done, which means that if you spend 5-10 seconds trying to work out what the heck you're supposed to be doing, you can fail flat on your face just from that. But we are reaching the end of this video, and I'm going to say thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time. Bye bye for now.